Thank you so much. Hi, everybody. My name is Brittany Rothmeyer. I'm the Executive Director of Fayette Alliance. We're a nonprofit land use advocacy organization here in Lexington. And I want to welcome you all to Grow Smart 101, our second session, which is promoting our farm. So we were fortunate enough to have our first session last week, which was Planning and Zoning 101. And we're just grateful that you all have joined us and taken the time today to become a more engaged citizen of Lexington. We at Fayette Alliance are very proud to present Grow Smart 101 for the UK community on a wide range of topics, ranging from growing our city in a smart, equitable, and sustainable way to agriculture and the significant impact that it has on our community. This is the second, like I mentioned, of 4 sessions we'll be hosting. So we hope that if you didn't join us last week, you'll continue to join us for the next 2 sessions as well. So next Friday, March 5th at noon, please join us for our discussion on responsible infrastructure. That session we'll be hearing from staff from the city government on their plans to reimagine Nicholasville Road and the future Town Branch Commons downtown. And you certainly won't want to miss our final session, which will be the following Friday, March 12th at noon, to learn about growing our city in a sustainable and equitable way, where we'll be joined by Councilmember James Brown and talk about Fayette Alliance's vision for smart growth, as well as hear from Councilmember Brown about gentrification issues that our city faces as we continue to grow and change. So before we jump in today, do just want to mention a few housekeeping items. Everyone is on mute, so please remain on mute until we go into our breakout sessions later in the session. We may ask or any questions that you all have, please put them in the chat at the bottom of your screen. Absolutely happy to get to those. Want this to be interactive, so make sure you add those in as we hear from our wonderful speakers today, and we'll do our best to answer all of those questions in our Q&A portion. We'll start off today with short presentations from our panelists, followed by a panel discussion that I'll lead moderate. So we will then move into question and answers, and then place you all into breakout sessions for our final 20 minutes so you all can get to know each other and discuss what you've learned today. So everyone should have received an email if you registered prior to the session that included term definitions and links to further resources. So absolutely encourage you all to look at those. We love to cultivate and combine resources in that email so that you all can do further reading. So whether you did it before the session or you're interested in some of the topics that come up today, please check out that email. We'll be sending a recap next week with a recording of this session. And again, highly encourage you all to check out those resources. We have been highlighting, if you only do one thing, watch this. So would direct you to that if you don't have a ton of time, but really, really excellent resource that I think can provide a great foundation for continuing education. So do want to do a quick overview of Fayette Alliance and what we do here in Lexington. So as I mentioned, we are a nonprofit land use advocacy organization, and we're completely funded by donations from engaged citizens like you. We're dedicated to achieving smart, equitable, and sustainable growth here in Lexington in 3 main areas. So the first way that we achieve our mission is through land use advocacy. We work hard at City Hall and beyond to advocate for policies and laws to sustainably and equitably grow our city and preserve and promote our farms. We advocate for policies that promote community-driven investment and discourage displacement. The second way that we achieve our mission is through research. So we are very fond of saying it's not if we grow, it's how we grow. Fayette Alliance focuses on how we grow by working with experts to conduct research on the complex issues that face our community's development. And the third way that we achieve our mission is through education. Citizens Planning Academy, which is now Grow Smart Academy, is our signature and premier educational offering and is the basis for these Grow Smart 101 sessions that we've adapted for UK students, staff, and faculty. We want citizens to get involved and understand the issues that impact our community. We also throughout the year have various in-person networking and educational events called Grow Smart Academy 2.0 that are now virtual, of course, due to the pandemic. So we have those bi-monthly, and at those events, we hear from local experts on a variety of smart growth topics throughout the year. Through our programs, our newsletter, and our various social channels, we want our community to understand how land use decisions impact our health, economic development, our environment, and our quality of life, as well as how to advocate as citizens for smart and equitable land use policy. We know that historically and currently inequitable and sometimes well-intentioned land use policies and decisions have had a negative impact on marginalized and underserved communities. So before I introduce our panelists, I do want to talk just a little bit about why Fayette Alliance focuses on land use and specifically agriculture in our strong rural economy. Agriculture is Lexington's factory floor. It's a critical piece of our community, of our economy, and why our community has such a high quality of life. You'll hear from our excellent speakers today who each have varied roles and focus areas in agriculture about the impact and the importance of it in our community. It accounts for $2 billion of our annual economy in Lexington and 1 in 12 jobs. So we know, and we'll hear more today about this, that agriculture means many different things here in Fayette County. It means soybeans, it means fruit and vegetables and hemp and horses and cattle and tobacco and so many more. All of the living things that can thrive because of Lexington's fertile, nationally significant soil. Our green space here in Lexington, our rural land, draws people to our community from all over the world. And many people's favorite thing about Lexington is that you can drive 15 minutes from wherever you are and be in farmland. As you all learned in Planning 101, the urban services boundary was originally put into place to limit infrastructure costs to the city, not only to preserve our agricultural land and green space. But it certainly had that effect, and the agricultural community continued to grow and thrive. And we have made preserving farmland in Fayette County for agriculture a priority here. In 1999, our community created the Rural Land Management Plan, which was an extensive effort to manage how we use land in our rural service area outside of our urban services boundary. Out of that plan came the program that's known as the Purchase of Development Rights, or PDR. This is a city-run program that receives a mix of local, state, and federal dollars to preserve critical, nationally significant land. But the Rural Land Management Plan put many other policies into place which help our farmland to be productive as well as protected so it can continue to be a booming force in our city. So there is a perception by some that growing a thriving, sustainable city is not compatible with preserving our fertile, truly unique farmland. So I want to pose to you all today that these two things actually make each other possible. They work in tandem. They're two sides of the same coin, and we should continue to value this balance while we look for solutions to the challenges that we face. Both our productive farmland and our thriving city and the relationship between the two of them have really made our community a successful, resilient, diverse economy for decades. But we do want to focus on, as we continue to promote our farms in Lexington, is accessibility and equity in agriculture and what kind of work we can do as a community to increase representation and support in these fields by people of color who for so long have not been recognized for their role or success here. And how do we promote our farms equitably and inclusively and intentionally? So as I mentioned before, at Fayette Alliance, their question is not if we grow, it's how we grow. That's why we focus on how we can balance our thriving city with our unique farmland. We know and firmly believe that we must do it responsibly, we must do it sustainably, and we must do it equitably. So without further ado, I do want to turn it over to our speakers who will tell you all more about how they're doing that work. So I'd like to give a big warm welcome to Ashley Smith and Dr. Allison Davis. I will turn it over to you all to introduce yourselves and let you all take it away with your presentations, and we'll follow that with a panel discussion. So Ashley, I'll turn it over to you if you want to start us off.
Thank you so much, Brittany. Well, good afternoon. First, I want to say a huge thanks to the university and Fayette Alliance for having us today. Definitely want to say hello to my former colleagues, Mary, Madeline. I'm so glad to see you on the call today, as well as the new Director of Education and Governmental Affairs, Ashley. I really appreciate the opportunity to work with you. Thank you, Brittany. And to my fellow panelists, Dr. Davis, so great to be on this call with you, sharing our expertise in our unique types of ways. For those joining us from the campus community, I'd like to introduce you to Black Soil. You might have heard a little bit about us. We just became the inaugural Community Innovation Partner at the Cornerstone Exchange. But as I review my notes, I'm remiss to not mention the other colleges, programs, and initiatives that we work with across the campus community, such as the College of Agriculture, Design, Nursing, Lewis Honors College, Business and Economics, the VACE Entrepreneurship Center, a Center for Social Justice and Equality, Confucius Institute, the Food Connection, and UK Healthcare. So as we progress through our presentation today and I introduce you to our mission and our vision, I want to share with you the people behind the question that asks, if Mother Nature can't see who puts the seed in the ground, then why do we have such enormous disparities in agriculture? And to root us into our presentation today, we're going to really hone in on Lexington-Fayette County. But in August of 2017, this organization was co-founded by myself and our co-founder, Trevor Claiborne, who is currently an extension agent at Kentucky State University. And we are the proud parents of Caroline and Trevor Jr. This is an older picture. They're now 2 years old and some change. But we come together as what was before COVID-19 an agritourism company, where we focused on bringing folks from our urban communities to our rural-based, small-scale, Black-owned farms across the state of Kentucky. And since we, started this mission, we've really been trying to chug along this historic shared history of agriculture, our agrarian roots here, especially in the state of Kentucky. And we started this business focusing on research and digging into studies centering on the USDA farm census that helped us understand the real root of the issue. Again, when we ask the question, if Mother Nature can't see who puts the seed in the ground, then why do we have such enormous disparities in agriculture? And here in the state of Kentucky, out of over 77,000 producers, less than 450 of those are African-American farmers, accounting for around 1.4%. And nationally, Black farmers represent less than or right at 2%. And this is the real kicker. Black farm products here in the state of Kentucky are valued at a little over $10 million compared to their white counterparts, and those product valuations being valued at over $5 billion. So again, we really dig deep into our Kentucky agrarian roots, and we'll talk a little bit more focused in here in Lexington-Fayette County in a moment, but here statewide, hemp, tobacco, equine, and distilling were the factory floor industries that made Kentucky and still make Kentucky what it is today. We oftentimes hang our tourism and economic development dollars on those rooted industries and sectors. So we started this placemaking, education-based agritourism company in August of 2017 when we traveled to Hart County. It's located in southwestern Kentucky, about 45 minutes outside of Bowling Green in Canmore, Kentucky, where we partnered with Barber's Farm, where 4 of the 7 siblings have returned to farming. Former sharecroppers who purchased the land from the tenant farmer and own to this day 150 acres, where they formerly ran dairy. They currently have a CSA program, livestock, and a farm store in Mumfordsville, where they themselves incubate 15 other rural-based small-scale farms, regardless of race within their area. And so we aim to be a solution-based program focusing really on education and outreach. And so our presence at the university, we want to emphasize the ability for you as students, as you embark on this life-changing journey of really figuring out what you're going to do with the rest of your life. We want to entice you to stay and retain that talent here in Lexington and Kentucky. And so we want to be able to open up your understanding of, again, our shared history through our mission, which is to reconnect Black Kentuckians to their heritage and legacy in agriculture, and our vision as we move to really advocate, something that I learned very clearly in my time and tenure at the Fayette Alliance, where I learned how to utilize facts and data and research and sound legal findings to advance causes. So again, we work to increase the market share of our farmers, our culinary artists, and our makers. And we're currently operating in 31 counties with partnerships with farmers across the state in East, West, and right here in Central Kentucky. So again, our services focused prior to COVID-19 around activating a conversation that was sitting on the shelf really dusty, and it needed to be pulled off and explored and examined and then repackaged in a way that was accessible, relevant, and tangible. And so through event-based education, by creating that bridge between farmers and consumers, it helped us move seamlessly as possible through our COVID-19 pandemic pivot. But before even the pivot, we were historically interpreting agriculture. And the University of Kentucky's first campus was at Ashland, the Henry Clay Estate. And for now 3 years, we've worked with the stakeholders, the board and the staff of Ashland to, again, help us understand the division of labor, the physiological demands of enslaved people as they harvested and broke hemp at Ashland, the Henry Clay Estate, which would at one point was an almost over 600 acre farm and plantation located here in Lexington-Fayette County. The great compromiser are Henry Clay, the Secretary of State, representative, acclaimed attorney, and an owner of almost 122 enslaved people. And at the age of 4, he inherited 60 enslaved people. So we work through tourism to tell the story of the art of the land, the agricultural roots that, again, have buoyed and carried us to where we are today. And so our Produce with a Purpose brings to life, again, the ability to tell the story of the tradition and legacy of Black farming here in the state of Kentucky. So again, we work with producers across the state. Here are just some highlighted here. And again, we'll dig deeper into Lexington-Fayette County here in a moment. But across the board, we have a spectrum of types and strategies and methods of growing, from traditional, conventional, organic, sustainable, no-till, regenerative. We focus on sourcing from farms with seasonal produce, specialty crops, local meat, and value-added products. And again, here in Lexington-Fayette County, as we explore our very unique history, we are in a county which has these what are known as hamlets, historic post-Civil War settlements that were established by former enslavers who parceled and sold the land in which their formerly enslaved men, women, and children tilled and toiled for no compensation. And so I'll show you a map here momentarily of where those hamlets are scattered throughout Lexington-Fayette County. But we have the opportunity and the honor of working with these farms here listed on this slide. And I'll tell you something that I've learned so well and clearly of working as an industry outsider under 5 years in the sector about farmers and people within the ag industry. Faithfulness, being steadfast, being able to see the long-term vision. When we started this work in 2017, we had no relationships or contacts within the Black, almost non-existent farming community here in Lexington-Fayette County. And we've been persistent in seeking out organic referrals and building relationships. And so we're so pleased in 2021 to share with you about Coleman Crest, a 132-year-old Black-owned farm where in 1888, Mr. Jim Coleman's great-grandfather purchased 13 acres of land as a formerly enslaved person from the family that enslaved him. Coleman Crest represents a bridge between what was and what is to be, as Mr. Coleman has relocated from New York City to return to his hometown after 42 years and reignite his occupation as a full-time farmer, where he wants to activate ag tech and cutting edge innovations and technologies to allow him to grow and serve as an education center for students here in Lexington-Fayette County. Green Landing here in Fayette County within Cadentown, a home of a Rosenwald Historic School. The Green Lavelle family represents a land-owning family in several counties, including Anderson and Christian. Simply Made brings forth our legacy and heritage as hemp farmers by creating full spectrum hemp CBD products here in the state. Slack Market Farm, located in Athens, is a raw milk halal meat share farm. And Silver Springs Farm, Equine and Vineyard, again, has a very unique connection to Ashland, the Henry Clay estate, and Henry Clay himself. They are Kentucky's only Black-owned vineyard, and they're located in Bracktown, yet another historic hamlet here in Lexington-Fayette County. It was the original campus of the James E. Pepper Distillery, which has now come back to life in our distillery district located in the Manchester Street corridor. Mr. Allen and Mrs. Leslie Carter live in the distiller's house, which was constructed by enslaved men who were owned by Henry Clay, who was an early owner in the James E. Pepper distillery. So I hope you hear our desire and our approach to make large connections to these very intimate and specific pieces of our shared history as Lexingtonians, as Kentuckians, and Americans. So you're hearing shared themes between the University of Kentucky, Ashland, and these rural hamlets. So as we work to promote our farms and tell the greater story, we want to showcase that these early land practitioners in our formerly enslaved communities located in our hamlets birthed again multi-billion, if not trillion-dollar industries and sectors that Dr. Davis will go deeper into through her research and her studies. But we as Black Soil really want to bring forth the relational piece, the social impact piece of what it means to tell a full and truly balanced story of who were the early practitioners of hemp. Who were the early jockeys and groomsmen and trainers and seamstresses creating the silks for our equine industry? Who were the early distillers on site? We have the opportunity to work in Woodford County at the Jack Jewett House, where an archaeological dig has discovered the nameless early distiller on site was an enslaved man and he was aged 61 years old. And then farming in general, the forced labor of chattel slavery that cultivated the affluence and wealth that our factory floor industries are able to stand upon. And again, as we think about here in Lexington-Fayette County and the work that we've done at Ashland, the Henry Clay Estate since 2018, we discover that farming and the practice of farming not only was traditional, but it also expanded into factories, so the industrial aspects. And the interesting piece about hemp, within his papers, Henry Clay himself noted that Kentucky was able to be a leading producer of hemp and gained such affluence and wealth from the production due to the ready supply of enslaved labor. This labor of hemp was extremely connected to the larger institution of enslavement throughout the Deep South, as the hemp that was broken and harvested in Kentucky was created to, they used the hemp to create bags, which then were shipped further south, where bales of cotton were then basically packaged within these hemp bags that enslaved people in Kentucky cultivated. So we bring our work full circle again and presently uplift the foodways and the cultural culinary heritage cultivated from the plantation kitchens such as Ashland, the Henry Clay Estate, and beyond, by working with small scale, oftentimes under-resourced culinary artists who take that Kentucky farm product. So we work to ensure to reduce waste across our local food system and our supply chain. And our makers within our network help us again continue expanding and extending the life of our raw ag products that we're able to base from our Kentucky farmers. And again, as we work moving forward in our production here in the county and bringing our farms to the city, we're able to house farm products from our Kentucky farmers and our hamlet producers at our Seed to Shelf Fulfillment Center located at 105 West Loudon next to the Gray Line station. So we're excited to continue promoting our rich, diverse network of suppliers as they move forward in, promoting their plan for the future with their proven track record. So that concludes my presentation, and I'm so grateful to be here, and thank you again.
Thank you so much, Ashley. I always love seeing your presentations, and I learn more every time I hear from them. So I will turn it over to Dr. Davis for her presentation, and then we'll jump into Q&A. And I'm really looking forward to having a wonderful conversation with you ladies. Dr. Davis.
Okay, well, good afternoon, everyone. It's great to see you all. I don't have the ability to share my screen. Ashley, are you?
Yes, I am making you a co-host. Well, I don't have that capacity. I don't know. Chris, can you make Dr. Davis a co-host, please?
While you're doing that, I'll say good afternoon. My name is Allison Davis. I am a professor in the Department of Agricultural Economics, which is housed in the College of Ag, Food and Environment at UK. So I'm assuming hopefully have some folks who are part of our college who are participating today. As part of my duties as professor, I teach a course called AEC 110, which is an introduction to all things ag econ, and exposes you to the wonderful careers associated with this field. So at any time you want to take that class, it's a really fun time. So I wanted to talk to you a little bit, I still can't share my screen, about some work that we did that I think really highlights the importance of agriculture to a local economy differently than what folks think about it. And it's something that I teach my students. I often start my course with kind of an overview of what the ag economy looks like, and in a very traditional sense, as well as in different ways of measuring it today that really capture the importance. So Ashley, are you my scroller?
Yes.
Okay, so scroll on ahead. So I think one thing, if you're a student at UK, I think it's really important to know what a wonderful, diverse economy that Lexington has captured. A lot of places around the country, we've put our eggs in a single basket. And when that basket sort of tilts over, we lose a significant part of our economy. A place suffers, and it sometimes goes into a more depressed state. And it's really hard to get back some vibrancy. You take, for example, Detroit, which was known as being, an auto manufacturing community. When that sector faced issues, Detroit started to see significant problems, lost a lot of their industry, lost a lot of their people. And it's really, really hard and very, very expensive to get a community back again. Lexington is one of the coolest places because it is so diverse in its makeup. It has just got so many different industries within the community that makes it really resilient when one particular type of industry faces difficulties. Next slide. So just so you have an idea, before I kind of go specifically into the ag economy, just so you have a bit of an idea of what Lexington looks like and why it's so diverse, this pie chart kind of gives you an idea of all the different industries that are in our fairly smallish size city. We've got UK healthcare. I can hear an ambulance in the background. I don't know if that was in Ashley's background, but we've got UK healthcare, we've got Baptist Health, we've got St. Joe's. So we've got a really robust healthcare sector. We've got some great retail. We've got some entertainment, and we've got hotels, motels. We've got tremendous educational systems with UK and Transy and BCTC. We've got a strong government sector. We've got, Lexmark with manufacturing. So we've got this really great, robust economy. And what I argue, and what you'll see, is that agriculture infiltrates each of these areas. If you looked at this pie chart, there's one little slice up at the top that's called agriculture, forestry, fishing, and hunting. And some folks look at that and say, what a small, inconsequential piece of an economy. But this is just capturing a really small part of what ag is for us. Lexington is very unique. We are truly a cluster of agriculture, and we have a lot of supporting services and businesses that make it so robust. So I argue that this pie slice is actually dispersed all through all the other pie slices here. But if you're thinking about, if you're from Lexington, or if you're thinking about what you might do when you graduate from college, this is a tremendous city to live in. Next slide. So what I'm trying to suggest, and what I've worked on for the last, 10 years now, is trying to capture the essence of all ag in our community. And this little illustration here is unique to Lexington. You can't take this and plop it in any other place where there is kind of production agriculture. It is something that is very special to Lexington. It all is around the center, this agricultural production center. And within Lexington, we can talk about horses, we can talk about cattle, and Ashley talked about hemp. We can talk about, what is our factory floor, as Brittany calls it. What are we growing, right? And that's what we consider agriculture. But in Lexington, we're surrounded by all these other sectors that are so important to building and enhancing our factory floor. And so we have at the top, you can see we have food processing and manufacturing. We've got some mills. We've got Brumfield hay and grain. We've got agricultural inputs. So we need to buy farm equipment. We need to buy fertilizer. We need to buy food from feed mills. If you've driven around in Lexington, you see a couple of fences, just a few. Well, we have to have those fences from somewhere. So we construct those fences, we hire people to install those fences. All those are really critical to ag. When you start going around to these kind of darker colored, the blue colored circles, this is something that is really unique to Lexington. Because of our equine sector and because of our cattle sector, we have tremendous veterinary services. And I don't know, for those of you who might be students in equine program, we've got Root and Riddle, we've got Haggard. That doesn't happen in every community. These are really, really world-class programs that without the horse sector in Lexington, those programs would not be here. We've got folks who have to do accounting for our farms, provide insurance for our farms. So lots of different professional services that you all might be actually going to school for to become, whether it's in Gatton College of Business, you're doing accounting or marketing, whether you're doing pre-vet and you're doing biology. These are all those types of services that are in our community dedicated to agriculture. I'm not going to go through all these because I know we'll talk about this in the panel towards the end, but we've got organizations and associations that are so important. They're national and they're headquartered in Lexington. If you've been out to the Kentucky Horse Park, you'll see a lot of national programs that are out there supporting the equine sector. This is their only location. This is a really important place for them to be. If you had a chance, I don't know if anyone's ever done a field trip out to the Bluegrass Stockyards, their new location. Man, that place is super, super cool. It's world class and it really deserves a really quick trip up 75 to go look at. It's inside our county. So what we did was really look at all these different individual businesses and the industries that they fall within and tried to measure how they were contributing to the local economy, to tell that story of the importance of agriculture to our community. Next slide. So this is something that I have used a lot. We did a report for Fayette Alliance to help them tell their story. That little pie slice, that little 2% that we saw, that you can collect those data on any public data website that says, ag is just like one of every 50 jobs. And so they talk about that. And what that means is it doesn't necessarily always receive the same attention from community leaders. And so we wanted to reframe that story. We wanted to tell it in a way that really captured its value. And so what we did was we went through all those businesses on the previous slide. We went basically through a telephone directory. You know, many of you are too young to know what a telephone book is, but essentially that's what we did, right? We went through and said, every business that we know 100% deals with agriculture, we're going to include that in its contribution to the local economy. So when we did that, we found that 1 out of every 12 jobs was either directly or indirectly associated with agriculture within Lexington. That's pretty significant. So it's just about, 8%, 9% of our jobs are dedicated to Lexington. And that's wonderful because the rest of the Lexington economy is so diverse. So this is it's just a really great share of the local economy. I know that Brittany mentioned early on that ag accounts for about $2.3 billion in annual economic activity, just in Lexington. This is not the state, just in Lexington. We have a payroll of about $8.5 million. And from that payroll comes taxes, which allows the city to provide essential services to you, to your parents, to the university, and to other businesses. I asked this question a lot to my class, and often I asked the class, what's the Kentucky's biggest ag receipt? And for those who may or may not know, it is poultry, which is something that is very hard for folks in Kentucky to kind of get into. It's not a super local industry. But then horses and equine are our next biggest sector in agriculture. In Fayette County, it's horses, breeding, and other support services dedicated to the equine and cattle industry. Then we have cattle and calves, tobacco, which we know has reduced over time, and then grains and oil seeds. And I mentioned already that Lexington is home to these 2 world-renowned equine veterinary hospitals. Next slide. So just to have a sense of what would happen, and if one of the goals of the Fayette Alliance is to continue to educate about the importance of preserving our farmland. And so we often look at, what if we don't do that? What if we just say, hey, this farmland can be used for anything, right? And so what we tried to capture is what would be lost if we started to chip away at the land that's dedicated to agriculture. What are those types of industries, right? And people who may not understand ag will think, oh, it's just farmland, right? There's nothing else to be had from it. Well, no. What we find is that you'd lose businesses in wholesale trade. We'd lose, obviously, production agriculture, real estate, truck transportation, insurance carriers. So there's a pretty significant consequence when we start chipping away at our land. The other side just gives you a little bit of idea of the top jobs. And this is just related to production agriculture that you would see associated with the ag economy in Lexington. Next slide. So I'm coming to a close here, I think, but I want to mention it's not just about the money. The money is certainly very important. It's a really important talking piece when you're talking to elected officials who think constantly about tax revenues and how they can provide adequate services to all of their people, particularly in times of COVID when there's job loss and there's not necessarily that same revenue coming in. It's really, really critical. But there are 2 other pieces that are really, really critical that don't necessarily have that same monetary value, but they're really important. And one is we spent some time talking to non-agricultural business leaders and said, what is it about Lexington, about this kind of unique scenery? And they just mentioned how absolutely important it was as a recruitment and retention for innovative workforce. So, if you're a doctor and UK is trying to woo you in and they fly you in, and you fly in over the Lexington airport, which could be arguably the most beautiful landing ever, to be going over Keeneland and to see these beautiful horse farms. That's a recruitment tool. That's why I came to University of Kentucky. I used to live in, and work at University of Nevada, Reno. They don't have grass and they don't have horses. They have casinos and they have tumbleweeds. And that's not the same image when you come in from an airplane. So I flew in here. They drove me around the city, showed me how beautiful it was. It was a huge draw. That's what we do when we bring folks in, is we give them the tour of what this unique rural landscape looks like. So once you're here though, well, now I enjoy it, right? I would be willing to pay to maintain that amenity. I want to know that I'm a short drive away from Keeneland or from all these beautiful horse farms or from this just very peaceful rural landscape. So people are actually willing to pay that, which kind of, when you start to look at it, looks very much like what they're willing to pay. And I think Brittany mentioned this earlier for the PDR program. So they're willing to pay to preserve our land in its current state. So I think with that, I just wanted to highlight the importance of agriculture, and I will tell folks it is not the only sector that we should have. That's why I say Lexington is so wonderful, because it is so diverse, but it is what makes us special. And it's something that we must try to preserve. All right, with that, I think I am done.
Thank you so much, Dr. Davis. And I really thank you both for both of your excellent presentations. And, you know, I think it just really sets the stage for a good discussion, and hopefully our attendees will think differently about agriculture than they came to this session thinking about it. It's a diverse, certainly a diverse field as far as interests go. And Dr. Davis, like you said, it's really all about that balance. It's how do we, and that Ashley spoke to as well, it's how do we balance our urban core with our rural landscape, knowing that, you know, it can't just be either one, that there's got to be some mix of the two. So I do want to jump into a couple of questions that I want to talk with both of you all about, but I would also encourage anyone in the audience that has questions to please submit your questions. I want to get to those as opposed to asking all of my questions that we've got prompts for here. So please go ahead and submit your questions, and I will absolutely get to those. And then I want to make sure we get to breakout sessions too. So I will jump into some questions for Ashley and Dr. Davis. So first, as we saw, I think that both of your really, really important critical work expands the way we think about agriculture in Lexington and in Fayette County. I think, you know, people that aren't familiar with agriculture, you know, may come here and only think about horse farms because that has such a big presence. But there are so many other ways to think about it. And I think that you all both of your work reflects that. And so I think, you know, as Ashley spoke to, it's really important for us to consider whose voices are at the table in agriculture and what does that mean for our community. So I want to pose this question to both of you. Over the years, how has this perception of agriculture and what it means in Lexington changed? And what is the most critical thing to each of you to continuing to broaden our understanding of agriculture and ensuring that there's a diversity of voices at the table? And whoever wants to start first can take it.
I think the perception of ag kind of has been like an accordion, people coming in and out, a love for our horse industry, and then a kind of a backlash against our horse industry. So it's a very fluid, ever-changing, you know, public perception. But I think with the onslaught of organizations such as App Harvest, entities across the country using more ag tech, it really does make the sectored industry more interesting to a lot more young folks. And you see educational programs, entire schools being framed and designed around that kind of, you know, next generation of prosperity for agriculture. When it comes to Black Soil's vision, ultimately really raising back up our hamlets to be powerful centers of economic development and life and culture, connecting the small scale farmers to the institutions such as the churches within those communities to really anchor in people being able to access the seasonal produce. Because oftentimes people think of, urban populations inside of the city limits, but there is the largest Black home ownership rate within our hamlet. So it really does anchor in that American dream in a lot of ways.
I think COVID really highlighted also, which seems silly, the relationship between agriculture and food. Suddenly it became we started thinking about food a lot more because it became really hard to find. And we had relied so much on kind of, bringing food in from other places, and it was sort of this unknown. And there is such an emphasis right now on where food comes from and focusing on impacting that local farmer, that I think, and I think Ashley's right, it's a bit of an accordion. How long will this last? Well, it will last as long as people's passion and investments go into it. There's a lot of funding out there right now to ensure that this kind of trend continues. But it, in addition to like the food, just thinking about food in general, but this is also, this is a great opportunity to think about those who don't have significant incomes that allow them to buy food, as you and I might. They're forced to buying processed food, not healthy. It contributes to diabetes and obesity and just poor health in general. And this is an opportunity for those who we've got Kentucky Double Dollars program, we've got the SNAP program, all designed to have individuals who have, limited means to have access to local, fresh, healthy food. And I just think now's a really good time to continue that, but also to understand where that food came from and to support equity, to support local, to support healthy, to support values. And I just think Lexington is a great place to combine all those things together.
Absolutely. And I think you're right about the pandemic, highlighting that. And I will certainly say, with Black Soil last year, they started offering CSAs. And so I signed up for one, and every Sunday, went to the Lyric and picked up my CSA. And it was really powerful to know. And again, I think highlighted by the pandemic, which is silly because this is, they've been in existence. But it was, really powerful to know that you were not only supporting local business, but your food, was coming from somewhere that you could drive to. And I would certainly encourage college students, to think about that when, maybe instead of going to the grocery, there are options for CSAs that are available that you can get fresh food from local people, support local business. And I think that's really powerful. So I do want to get to a question from Rachel, and that I think is really important. And I absolutely want Ashley and Dr. Davis to address. So, and that is, what are ways that someone from a non-agriculture background can become more involved with Lexington's agriculture?
I'm gonna let Ashley go first. That's a good question. I feel like she's
totally me. Yeah. When I, growing up, we had, a garden in our backyard, and I definitely would not refer to myself as a farmer coming from a farm family. I was recruited from the arts to work at the Fayette Alliance. So when I started working there, it opened up my mind and my just, perspective of what was possible. I think with agriculture, it's finding that special part that you can play. The part that I play is being a matchmaker and helping people, move from point A to point B, and highlighting again that beautiful graphic in Dr. Davis's work. There's so many paths and strategies and things that you can do to really empower your community and see the difference. You can see the results. You can see, like Brittany was saying, like folks coming in and picking up their CSAs or having that light bulb moment on a farm once they've started talking to a farmer. So I had to definitely get over my insecurity of not being the quote unquote, farm or ag person. I'm not FFA or any of that. So, wherever you find yourself, be confident in what you bring to the table, because there is a producer, someone in that supply chain looking for someone just like yourself.
I'll give a story of, I am from Baltimore, Maryland. I have no background in ag. I did not do 4-H. I did not do FFA. I didn't know what cooperative extension was. So I feel like I'm a really good spokesperson for here I am in the world of ag. So my daughter, who grew up in Lexington, she went to Lafayette and then went to UK, where she didn't even realize that the major she was pursuing was the same one her father did. And she was shocked that suddenly that there was an entomology degree for study of bugs. So clearly we did not put any pressure on her to continue in our footsteps. And she went off to University of Michigan, and now she lives in Eastern Kentucky, and she runs a organic herb farm, and she does dried herbs and teas. And it was just because she just started exploring. She traveled. She was exploring, she tried things, she asked questions, she went to the farmer's market, she went to meetings on, anything from conservation to anything about nature. It was just sort of through, I'm not surprised that she is where she is, but 5 years ago, you would never have convinced me that she'd be a farmer. And she's surrounded by people who are her age now, who are doing similar things. So I think what I would say is to be involved is, I think y'all should go up to the stockyards. It just gives you a great opportunity to understand something different than what we see as beautiful horse farming, which is beautiful, but it is just super cool to see what goes on there. So the more you can educate yourself about what agriculture is, and the more you can understand the farmer, I think that can only help you figure out ways to be involved. And bring friends. Yeah, bring friends.
Yeah. And you can have lunch there. There's an excellent cafe there. You can go and have lunch and take a tour. And I would also say, and I was going to ask Ashley to speak a little bit more to this as well, but she mentioned their Black Soils brick and mortar space, which is right next to Grayline Station. But I was also hoping, Ashley, that you could speak a little bit to Julietta Market and the work that you all are doing inside Grayline Station, because I think, for this audience, Grayline Station, represents this really neat space that is bringing together neighbors and community members. You can eat and drink and play and get educated about Black soil and agriculture. And I think what Black Soil has done is this amazing thing of bringing together community members with rural, just as the mission of Black Soil is to reconnect Black Kentuckians with their heritage and agriculture. And I think in addition to that, it's connecting Lexington community members with our history and agriculture in ways that we have kind of fallen away from thinking about it. So actually I wanted to ask if you could speak a little bit about your work at your brick and mortar location on Loudon, and then as well with Julietta Market, and what that space is going to be, and what role you hope that it serves in the community moving forward.
Okay, great. So again, also like the work of Fayette Alliance, our brick and mortar represents bringing the farm to our cities. So our station here at 105 West Loudon is our seed to shelf fulfillment center. So much like finding your space, we listened very, very closely to what farmers were telling us. I have this product, but oftentimes I don't know where it's going to end up. And so our goal was to open a place that we could safely store, freeze, refrigerate, and wholesale. So that allows us to carve out more market share for farmers now from all 120 counties. Next door at the Julietta Market, in the infill and redevelopment project that was formerly the Lexington bus station, it's a mixed use facility, mixed income business owners and entrepreneurs. So on the kind of streetscape, there are the Grayline Station shops, Forage, Cocoa, North Lime Coffee and Donuts, Wilson's, and then in partnership with the local nonprofit Community Development Corporation, the private property owner has created this kind of incubator market, a public market called the Julietta Market. And it is named after Julia Martin, who was an early civil rights leader who worked to integrate the building. So long story short, our role at Julietta Market is focusing on bringing fresh produce to a chronic food desert. In the north side of Lexington, regardless of financial ability, the neighbors here live in a food desert. And we accept SNAP. And starting in April, our Bluegrass Double Dollars program, which will allow community members to enjoy a $15 voucher of produce twice a month. So you'll swipe your EBT on the first kind of week you come, and then the second week, the Bluegrass Double Dollars program covers your share. This also allows us to have freezers and reach-ins where we've gone out into the community and cultivated, again, more opportunities for Kentucky farm products to be woven into larger businesses, such as our small locally owned farm-to-table restaurants. So they've struggled through COVID-19. And the Julietta Market, again, is to serve and be an incubator. So we've recruited some great diverse food brands to have their product at the Julietta Market, which is EBT, cleared, and we have the Bluegrass Double Dollars, thus opening up great dining experiences to even more Lexingtonians, regardless of their financial ability. So to us, this brick and mortar is the execution, the application of our mission and our vision that allows us to beckon and bring forth, students for engagements such as volunteer opportunities, internships, really cultivating, again, that connection to really reach even more people with, it's great to know who your farmer is, and we want to be able to introduce you just to a few and then get you started, and you can take it from there. So that's really our goal and our vision here at 105 and 101 West Loudon.
I love it. And I think these conversations too, and I hope, our attendees feel the same way, but, they remind me all the time what a special place Lexington is. And there are so many things that are exciting in this community that are happening in ways for you to really get connected. And I would say too, in addition to what Ashley and Dr. Davis mentioned, is, the farmers market downtown. Go downtown. You just walk around, talk to some of the farmers about where they've come from and what they've got. And it's a fun thing to do on the weekend and be outside as the weather's getting nicer. So, there are easy ways to kind of plug in and really educate yourself on different ways that you can get involved in agriculture. So once again, I'm going to do a little shout out for questions. Would love to get more. And in the meantime, Dr. Davis, I was wondering if you could speak a little bit to solar energy. We haven't talked a lot about kind of the environmental aspect of it, but as I think, some of our attendees will have seen the rise of clean, green, renewable energy. And a lot of times the space where that takes place is on farmland. Whether you've gone on a road trip and seen wind farms, you've seen solar farms, that takes place on farmland. And so it's inherently related to agriculture here in Fayette County. So Kentucky as a state is seeing a rise in solar farms to produce clean, green energy, but this is very complicated. They're being placed on large farms, large areas of prime farmland in Kentucky. And I was wondering if you could speak a little bit to your examination into industrial solar on prime farmland and what factors we should consider as a community when we think about solar energy or other types of renewable energy.
I would love to. Thank you, Brittany. So I think solar farming has become really popular, and depends on who you talk to if we want to actually use the word solar farming, because a lot of folks who are concerned about the future of prime farmland would like to keep it in this idea of industrial scale solar. This is not new. The idea of taking large plots of land and dedicating it to solar panels is not new. It's new to Kentucky. It's been out on the West Coast for many, many years. And so they've been sort of leading the way and have given us some ideas of what this means when it starts coming to other parts of the country. So in essence, and if any of you have driven on I-64 and you're going past Winchester, Clark County, you will see on your right-hand side a huge array of solar panels. And you know, no one, I hope no one in their right mind would say that we hate solar, because we don't, right? We're very, really need to identify alternative sources of fuel, and solar certainly does that. The problem is that when you have these panels, it is the cheapest way to get a panel into the ground is in prime soil, right? It's you take concrete and you're putting in, and wouldn't it be easier to dig out this beautiful soil versus going through a bunch of rocks, right? And so those lands are very, very attractive to solar developers. And so we have seen a huge influx now that the land on the West Coast has been basically, you know, it's done. And there's really not a whole lot of land left to be used for solar out there. And you've got fairly inexpensive land in the mid-central part of the country where we are. People have been knocking on doors in Kentucky. And so there's been a lot of conversation in central Kentucky about this recently, because there's been a lot of contracts between solar developers and farmers to say, give us, you know, let us lease your land for 20 years and you'll have a steady flow of income. You don't have to worry about the ups and downs of agriculture, you know, and then we'll be working on alternative energy. So the problem is that you've now taken that land out of its use, right? But you could see why it would be attractive to a farmer, right? Because suddenly farming is pretty volatile, right? And there are times where it's good and there are times where it's really not good. So now you're as a farmer, you're like, oh, this sounds like a great idea. Well, now you've taken your farmland and you're putting these solar panels in it, and for 20 years, it's out of you know, work. You can't grow anything when you have solar panels. You can have some really small like ruminants on there, but you can't have anything else. It's a place to do some like bee pollinators. But just suddenly like that, all these prime soils that we've been trying to safeguard are now being converted into solar fields. And those, in most instances, although not all, in most instances, all that electricity is actually being shipped to where the population centers are. So it's not as if, and now Bowling Green, there's one in Bowling Green, and they're really trying to harness that electricity. But the places in central Kentucky, it's being shipped out to the East Coast. So there's really no job creation, which is, you know, you're losing these ag jobs, you're losing food, and it's not impacting our own use of electricity, and it's really impacting prime soil. So the question is, why can't we put it on less prime farmland, right? Let's go down the road where it's not as productive. We've got maps, we know where less productive land is. Well, they're not interested because it's really expensive to start digging onto rock. So it has created quite the conflict kind of in Kentucky and North Carolina, all those places that have kind of large swaths of kind of flat land. It's been a lot of lawsuits, a lot of moratoriums where communities are like, oh my God, we cannot wrap our heads around this. Like we can't have like Farmer Joe give his, you know, 1,000 acres, and then right next door, we still have prime soil. And then over here, so they'll put a moratorium on any new contracts and say, we gotta hold on, we gotta figure out what we want as a community, how we want to build and how we wanna develop. Similar to how we wanna build housing or how we wanna build industry. It's a very similar discussion, but it's a very attractive proposal for farmers. So it's something I've been teaching in my class. My students have become very interested in the idea and have done some studying on it. And I had a phone call or an email yesterday from someone in Western Kentucky who read a paper I wrote on it and said it really helped her because these contracts are 20-year contracts. And if solar, as technology changes, it becomes less expensive to do some things, right? We've seen that. So what happens if we are able to get these like itty bitty little solar panels in 15 years that can harness the same amount of electricity? You abandon land, right? And who's going to clean that up? And those contracts don't include language on that. So as the homeowner or the landowner, I suddenly have a farm full of solar arrays that you can't dump in a dump, you know. So it's a really big deal that I don't know if we saw happening in Kentucky about a year or 2 years ago, but it has now become front and center for central Kentucky. Sorry, that was long-winded, Brittany.
No, I mean, I think it's really interesting. I think it's something that we're going to have to continue to grapple with. And like you said, that's why our land use planning, right? Our planning and zoning is so important. It's where can you, how can we best utilize our land and make the best use of the type of lands that we have for the best types of uses. And so, you know, that is really kind of how this, I think, comes full circle. It's really why Fayette Alliance as an organization cares about land use policy. It's how do we create policies to protect our farmland, but also encourage the best and highest uses for the types of land that we have. And so Rachel put another question in the chat. Is any of the energy from Kentucky solar panels used for the state or just on the East Coast? And I think that's another good question, another piece of that.
Yeah, and I mean, certainly I want to make sure that if there's nothing bad about a residence putting, you know, a solar roof on. I mean, that's your investment. It's actually an upgrade to your property. You're able to harness that electricity. We're talking about acres and acres of land where, you know, it's an industry essentially. So I want to be careful. I don't want to seem like I'm anti-solar because I am not. I'm just planning solar is what I am.
But I think, you know, the large scale industrial solar, that, as I understand it, goes to the grid. And so it's not that it's staying here in the state necessarily. Unless there are any other audience questions here, we'll jump to our breakout session. So I'll certainly